Hello, Internet family. This is Anjanette Potter, also known as Adam's Rib, and you are looking at Monday Night Quarterback. So, the first thing I want to go over, if you're a Friends fan, then you already know by all of the press coverage that Matthew Perry, also known as Chandler Bing, on on for, on Friends has lost his life. And it's been like the latest in a string, it seems, of Hollywood notables that have transitioned. So we also lost Richard Roundtree. I always thought of Richard Roundtree as one of the coolest black men of the 70s. For most noted for his role in the movie Shaft. Shaft was one of the first movies in the 70s to have sequels. It became a franchise. Also, actor Richard Mole, who many of us, if you were a fan of Night Court, the show Night Court, the original, not the reboot that they're doing right now, remember him as Bull, the tall, bald-headed guy. So he passed away as well. Both actors were in their 80s, and not to sound cold, but typically the older someone is or the further up they are in age, the more likely you are to see them as kind of kissing death's door. They're getting older and their mortality is not a big shock. Even though you're still heartbroken, you know that you won't see them anymore in this life. You know that you miss them, and if they're famous enough and you admire them, you miss them really quick. I mean, those are. But this one, I know at one point, putting aside the little bit of controversy there was over, Friends versus Living Single, which I was a little late to the party on Friends because I believe they might have been on the same night. Okay, I know when they first started Friends, I didn't even know what time they came on, until I was like, they come on that early? Because they covered a lot of adult topics on the show, even though they were hilariously funny. Usually shows that don't feature any children in them aren't on as early as 8 o'clock. And so they were on at a time where there was another show that I was watching that at that particular time in my life, it would have been a predominantly black cast, because I was, not that I didn't watch any white shows at all, okay, but my mind was on watching and supporting shows that had a predominantly black cast or black cinema, black media. That's just where I was. And so I remember I was still doing hair during that time, and I remember I must have done the Rachel haircut, Jennifer Aniston's cut that she was famous for during that time, on pretty much just like almost every black woman in Columbus had the Halle Berry. Pretty much every white woman and quite a few black ones was sporting the Rachel. So not only and the different looks that Courtney Cox was sporting during the time of the show as well. I also remember doing the Friends, the guys' different looks also started a trend where we were doing the guys' haircuts on a whole lot of white guys here in town as well. So they were a very trendy show. The first show that I wound up watching them when the show that they were up against left the air. That show was no longer on, and so I started watching Friends. And I can remember, like, every time I watched it here and there before that point, and every time I watched it, they cracked me up. And it was very hard to, anywhere you looked, they were such a phenomenon that everywhere you looked, they were being promoted. And there was information about them. I remember when Jennifer Aniston first started acting, it was a big deal because her father, if you're an old soap fan, then you remember her father from, I'm trying to remember, one of the NBC soaps. So I think it might have been Days of Our Lives that he was on. And he was I think he was a villain. And she just recently, he made his transition. And like I said, being older and everything, even though it's a shock, I remember my grandmother leaving here at 81. You're still, it doesn't hurt any less. But it's not as much of a shock as somebody leaving at 54. So I remember it was a big deal that that John Aniston, her father, that his daughter was going to be acting. And the next thing you know, she was, on Friends. They were I remember the first show that I watched was the one involving David Schwimmer's character Ross. His ex-wife was marrying the woman that she left him for. And it was a very hilarious episode. And so when the show that I was watching, which like I said may have been Living Single, and if you listen to any of the racial topics that have been talked about as far as Black representation and different things, that Living Single was basically considered to be the Black Friends. And I'll say this: if you want to know anything about any of that, just look up Living Single versus Friends, and and there should be a lot of media discussing the two shows. I don't want to get into that now because his death is very, very fresh, and it's not a topic I want to go into right after the show losing one of its major cast figures. So I had started watching it, and to be honest with you, once the show that I was watching and was a big fan of, could have also been Martin. But once they were, off the air and no longer on the air, I immediately started watching Friends. Plus, I've watched a lot of the reruns and everything too once they went into syndication. So out of them, I always thought that he was the funny one. They were all funny, but he seemed to have the best one-liners. It seemed like every time he seemed to be the one that had the funniest one-liners and really had a lot going. So wherever you are on any of this stuff, if you are following anybody that is a fan of his, or you are following any of his social media or his or any of his loved ones or relatives, do what you can. You know me, as soon as there's a transition, one of the things I'm always liking to tell people is show them some love. If you read his book, his memoir that has been out, or you happen to see anything, I remember that once Friends ended, because once I started watching, I watched pretty much all the way up to the finale. So I remember when they got the idea to get him involved with Courtney Cox's character Monica. And I was just like, oh, this is so, awesome, because the two of them comically were really funny. And it's almost like double the funny once they made them a couple. And, toward the end of the show, it seemed like they were doing a lot of adulting, because one of the biggest things with the show was how well they, represented Gen X, which is my generation, those of us in our 50s, the mothers and fathers of the millennials. If you listen to some of the media that's out here now, you would think that the baby boomers birthed the millennials. They did not. They did not. They are the grandparents of Gen Y and Gen Z. They are not their parents. Their parents actually belong to what you would call Gen Xers. And a lot of people could relate to the show because of the different issues. The only problem that really anybody seemed to have, and this is with most shows that carry a mostly white cast on all the networks, and that is the lack of black or minority representation. And before you go, oh my God, she's blah 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 blah, we're so sick and tired of hearing black people in that. Well, we're sick and tired of having to say it. We're sick and tired of having to ask. And other than that, it was a hilarious show. Nobody's taking away from the quality of any of these programs when we say what we say, but it was a good show. And like I said, to me, he was one of the funnier. They were all funny. They all had, their moments, but he was the one that was known for being, I always tended to look at his character as the guy, that platonic male friend that you could be somewhere at an outing, at a party, at an event, and he would be the one sitting next to you, and both of you be cracking on everybody else in the room. I've had a few friends like him. So I was like, his, that particular character. I also remember him being given, like, when the show left the air, I also remember him being given another sitcom, because most people remember Joey, which was the character that got spun off. But a lot of people, I don't know if anybody remembers that at one point Matthew Perry was also given a sitcom, but it wasn't a spinoff. It was just a sitcom. I think he was a group therapist or whatever, and so it was a sitcom that was centered around him. And he seemed to carry his show really well, which was a demonstration of his acting chops. I remember watching it and thinking, okay, go on with your bad self, because I'm all for people meeting their goals and being able to get into that place of success and being able to keep it. And the sitcom, it didn't stay around very long. And, it could have been because of the different issues he was having. He had a lot of health issues. So, if you are into celebrity memoirs, I recommend that you purchase his. If you have problems with addiction, which he suffered, I just got done looking at some media where they are, because, they're now showing old clips of interviews that he gave, to promote the book. He talked about not being able to watch Friends because he knew what he was going through personally. And every time he looked, no matter what season it was, he could tell by the way he looked what he was suffering through during that time period. And it's horrible. It's horrible to think that somebody that, brought such joy into other people's homes, during that time, they were suffering. So, like I said, because this is a media ministry that will not end, I'm never quitting. We discuss, we don't see death as the end of life. We see death as a transition. Most, because Christians believe in an afterlife. Okay, so we know that this is not the end for anyone. Any of the notables that left here, their life on this side of, the transition between eternity here and eternity, we no longer going to see them on this side. Now, where they end up depends on whether or not they accepted Christ in the land of the living. I don't have a heaven or hell to put none of these people in. But the only thing that I can say is that when you leave this life, you will be spending eternity somewhere. And so when I think about some of the stuff that I've been through at the hands of people who say they are saved and who say they are Christian, just like I said about the pastor who gave the woman herpes and different other people that are involved in stuff that they know is not Christ-like. People are leaving here like God does not discriminate. I remember during the whole prosperity messages and, what I call the greed gospel, I happened to be reading, and the story of Lazarus and the rich man came to me, and I went and read it. And one of the first things I noticed is that, the Word of God says that the rich man opened up his eyes in hell. Now, please don't run with that and act like I'm talking about any of these people and saying that where they went. But I am making the point that God doesn't discriminate. No amount of money is going to help you escape your afterlife. No matter where, my hope when people leave here and make their transition is that they got, their affairs together spiritually before leaving. I can't say that about Matthew Perry. The only thing I can say about Matthew Perry is he's definitely missed. When I saw the news, and saw that he was no longer with us, he's actually the second member of that cast to transition. I think the guy named Gunther, if you're a fan of the series, you will remember Gunther was the guy who worked at the coffee shop that they were always at. He made his transition about a few years ago. So even though 54 is young, 54 is really what they call just past midlife. I may do a podcast on Gen X and talk about why different shows were so central to, that representation. Just like, people talked about years before, a show called 30 Something being a big deal back when it was on because of the generation that it represented. Many times, like I said, right now I've been watching a lot of older shows, older movies, and because of being becoming a newbie history buff, I'm noticing a lot of things as, a black woman and as a black feminist, as a black Christian feminist. A lot of times I look at some of these shows and it really shows me where we were as a society and as a culture during a lot of these time periods. And it's been an interesting ride. I'm gonna stay on this ride until I feel like the Holy Spirit tells me to not be on this ride. So it's been there's been news coverage, and of course, they're talking, there's also, he was the latest in what they call the Nepo baby thing, which over 50 some years old, you're first of all, no longer a baby. But if your success has kind of surpassed that of the parents in your family that are famous, you might have had some doors open for you because of who they were, but you've done more than this is, you've done more than enough to keep those doors open on your own. So I'm not always in favor of people calling people Nepo babies because, if they're a bad actor or actress or bad singer, then that's one thing. But I'm also, I don't know, I have a different take on the whole Nepo baby thing that people talk about, simply because if you were able to get doors open, I remember at one point, Montana Fishburne, daughter of Lawrence Fishburne, trying to do porn. And I was like, well, shoot, girl, this is the time where you need to use your daddy's connections to get you into something better. I'm like, shoot, that's for people who ain't got no connections, to be perfectly honest with you. And even without connections, sex work ain't for me. It just isn't. Any type of sex work is not for me. So I'm not mad at anybody whose parents, who has the ability, because so many people, entertainment is such a hard business to break into. And there are so many vultures out there that take advantage of everybody. Like, ain't nobody free from some of these horrible people that are out there that like to prey on people. And it isn't always the porn industry. Look at Harvey Weinstein and some of these others. One thing, in spite of Matthew Perry's issues with substance abuse, one of the things I'm like, well, he's one of the few people, in spite of all of his issues, that hasn't been a Me Too moment for, some poor young woman or young man out there. No other stuff, nobody coming forward saying that he felt him up or did anything stupid to them. So back to the whole rich man opening up his eyes in hell. God does not discriminate. So your money cannot buy your way into heaven. You got to get that thing right with Christ. And if you are already maintaining that you are in Christ, that you've accepted him, then you have to enjoy, the freedom that you have in the land of the living. We're not delivered from bondage to go back into more bondage. If you're going to go out here and sin, abuse power over women and children, sin against your fellow believers, lead them into sexual sin, do all kind of crazy stuff in them, then your Christianity is not benefiting. We are not just free from the penalty of sin, which is, punishment, eternal torment in the afterlife. We are also free from the power of sin. Whenever I think about that, I think about people who have had issues with addiction and substance abuse, and how many of their testimonies is that they are free from that bondage. They no longer are worried about that drug calling them back. And it isn't always easy. I always feel bad for people who have them kind of issues, because it can be a lifelong battle. All abuse, all addiction is supernatural warfare. And I don't think people understand that. All addiction, no matter what, all addiction is a lifelong supernatural battle. Whether it's food, whether it's, drugs, whether it's intimacy issues, all people suffer. And everybody's battling something. And so one of the things I will say is his openness to discuss his struggles. I always thought was a bit admirable, because somebody, people see people on their screen, they see Hollywood, I'm not, it's just something. When people you don't know what someone is battling, even in your church, even in the pulpit. You don't know what somebody else is battling. So we definitely, as born-again Christians who have the power, I hear, people promoting witchcraft and promoting hoodoo and trying to, what bothers me as a Black woman is when certain things are supposed to be our, and I'm like, no, I'm a born-again Christian. We have the upper hand when it comes to hoodoo and voodoo and all of that other stuff. So why would I go and, that practicing hoodoo, it doesn't make you any blacker than the person who is following Christ. And like I said, in him we have the ability to be free of anything that the devil has sent to keep us in bondage. And we need to always remember that. And those of us who know it, we need to pray for others. We need to be better. We need to do better when it comes to interceding. Whether it's for the Amber Alert that you see out here, or the missing, the people that you hear that are missing, whether it's, the white woman who splashed across your page, or whether it's, the Black women that are constantly not even being people of color, that are barely being mentioned at all. We need to do a better job of interceding. We need to intercede on behalf of the church. Okay, and I'm not talking about propping up selfish, egotistical leaders who are abusing their flock. I'm talking about pray for these victims. When people come forward and they're reporting someone has harmed them, that is in a position of power, don't be so Don't be so concerned with protecting some pastor who isn't that isn't offering up one prayer on your behalf. Pray for these victims. Pray for these men to get help. Pray for them to leave that pulpit. Some of these men need to be sat down. Some of these church leaders that everybody has up on a pedestal need to be sat down. Instead of running out here buying all of their books and you know, crowding out or whatever, or showing up to see them preach, and they ain't living a nickel's worth of nothing. They running around here with women coming forward left and right, being abused by them. Y'all not praying. I can tell by the things that I went through. Y'all, you know, where's the intercessors? Where are the people? And I'm not just talking about coming out of your prayer closet with some fake word. I'm talking about seeing some things really. I remember the first church I belonged to, we were big on intercessory prayer. And we were so big on intercessory prayer that we were pulling down strongholds. We were seeing people were coming to the church and packing it out. But after a while, you know, the flesh gets in, and it became one of my dear friends who was going to that church, and eventually left because she felt like it was starting to turn into a talent show. There's so much that goes on the other side. Also today is still another leg in Music Monday, which I'm not going to stop. I'm learning so much as I go with my piano lessons and I do my practices and everything. Music really helps me. I remember when I took voice and piano during my undergrad, scheduling my piano practices, my musical practices, really helped me be organized with my other studies. And music, you know, affects the brain. For people who are musicians and perform music, music affects the brain a whole lot different, and we think differently as creatives than the rest of the world thinks. Also, because when you are performing music, you are tapping into the spiritual realm. For those of us who have a spiritual life, you are able to tap into the prophetic. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as I continue to talk about music, you know, especially when we're talking on my Perfect Pitch blog. There's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of benefits mentally for people who are creators, whether it's art therapy or whether it's music therapy. There's a lot of benefits to playing an instrument. And as I continue, because I still am doing the I'm still doing the chorus at my old alma mater. I'm still with the vocal chorus. I'm not quitting that either. As I learn more about music theory, and you know, I'm playing the instrument that I'm playing, which is, you know, the keyboard or piano. It's aiding me in my ability to sing, because I'm getting more acclimated with the notes, because we let me see here. So we sing off of, I don't know if you can see that, we sight sing. We ear sing too, but we also sight sing. So if you've ever seen this, it's a musical staff, and it basically is the notes that we should be playing, the beats that each of them, and all of that other stuff. So if you know anything about music theory, you know what that look like, what those musical notes and everything look like. So me practicing piano at home is helping me with singing, because I'm able to sit here and pound out whatever notes I'm supposed to be singing on the music that we practice for our vocal cords. So I'm not quitting any of the things that I'm doing anytime soon. So I'm just having to go through and continue to fight the good fight of faith and stay in here. So I'm going to get off here now. I didn't want to miss another Monday going live. I will be going live again on Wednesday. But I just wanted to go ahead and, offer a few words, my condolences to Matthew Perry's family. Really the families of all of the notables that have transitioned this week. My condolences to Richard Roundtree's family, Richard Bull's family. We thank you and Matthew Perry's family, and anybody that I missed that has transitioned this week. My condolences to you from Adams Rib Media Ministries. We pray that God be with you through this hour of grief. We grieve with you, but we also celebrate the life. We thank you for allowing your loved one to minister to us and bring so much joy to us. And we pray that as you see the coverage, that nothing that you're seeing brings you any pain. I'm going to go ahead and get off here. You guys have a good week. Enjoy the rest of your week. I will see you back on Wednesday on Hump Day. Have a good one.